Night live. We're going to give everybody a couple minutes to get into the room here. Tonight we're going to be working with the rubber leaf forms. I'm going to show you guys lots of tips and tricks to how to use these. I'm going to show you some new leaves. We're going to be working with the bark texture pads as well, but we'll give everybody a minute to come in. As you come in, there's no need to say mystery box. We've got a large number of mystery boxes tonight, and people placing orders will be able to order those mystery boxes, so you don't need to type in the words mystery box. And if you're watching this as a recording, typing in mystery box won't do you any good either, because the mystery boxes are available on the website, and I'll talk about those, and I'll show you guys what's going to be in that mystery box later tonight and explain how that's going to work. So we're going to just give it a minute here. My wife, Janine, is here. She'll be watching for questions and comments, and she'll try to catch my attention as we're going and let me know when there are some questions. So feel free to ask questions as we go tonight. So we are recording this, and then I have somebody editing it. So I'm just going to kind of start over now that we've got everybody, or most people are in the room, and so that it's easy for him to edit that beginning part out. So, hello everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm Michael Harbridge. Tonight we're going to be working with these rubber leaf forms, and I'm going to show you guys all kinds of great tips and tricks on things that you can do with these forms. We're going to make bowls with them. We're going to make dimensional pieces. I'll talk about adding leaves and things. You'll see pieces behind me, the leaf trees, the owls, different things, the pumpkins, the bark texture. This is a brand new piece that we're making now out of the flexible rubber, and this is the bark texture pad. And some of you maybe have gotten this in the ceramic form, but now it is available in a large flexible rubber version and a new little mini version. I'll show you why you might just need the mini version and not the big version tonight. So we're gonna start out. I'm gonna show you guys these new leaves. These are the new fig leaves. This is the largest of the fig leaves. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Forma-Leaf, I'll give you a little bit of information on that. We've sold these leaves for, 40, 30 some years probably. And it's had a few owners of the company. The most recent owners were the Gullicksons in Linwood, Washington. And we've worked with them for many years, and a short time ago they came to us and said that they couldn't keep up with the demand for it, and they were tired of cutting out all of the little leaves, and they wanted to sell the company. So we bought the company. Some of you maybe have been waiting for leaves for a while. As of today, every leaf order that we currently have is filled. A couple orders might be here yet, just waiting for some other items for the order, but everything is filled, and we've got extra inventory of almost every single leaf now, which is great. But they did a great job producing the leaves for many, many years, and I had the pleasure of going out and meeting with them a few weeks ago and learned the entire process from making molds from real leaves to make these forms, to actually casting and producing the leaves. And so all of these leaves, these are all fig leaves, these were actually from a tree that they had in their yard, and I picked leaves from that tree and I brought those leaves home, and we actually made molds for those. So it's kind of cool that it came from their yard in Washington. We're going to be coming out with a lot of other leaves, and those are some of the first ones. We've also got, I'll show you some new maple leaves tonight as well. And we're going to be coming out with large rhubarb. We're going to be coming out with some really cool pumpkin leaves. Everywhere I go now, I'm looking at leaves and seeing some really cool big leaves as well. So I want to flip the camera down here, and I'm going to talk about the large rhubarb leaf. This has been really popular. This was a new leaf that they came out with a couple years ago, and there's a couple little tips and tricks to this. And so what I've done so far is I rolled out a slab of clay, and then I've taken that rubber leaf form and I put that on top of it, and I rolled that through the slab roller so that it made the impression of the leaf into the piece of clay. And so I've got that here, and I've cut out the edges of the clay, just using a wooden tool, just going around the edges and cutting off that excess clay. I've got a little bit of excess clay here that I'm going to cut away. One of the reasons I like to use a wooden tool rather than a needle tool is I'm usually working on this craft foam, and needle tools tend to really cut into that, and I don't want to slice into the foam and wreck that. So I've got this leaf pressed into the slab of clay, and I've gone around and I've just cut the excess clay away from the edges. And some people would just take this piece and they would take it off of the form and they would turn it into a bowl. I like to get rid of that clunky edge that's on there. Now you'll see that this slab of clay is really thick. This is probably more than a ½ inch thick. And when I remove this rubber leaf form, you're going to see on this end, and I'll just lift this end up a little bit, how deep the middle vein goes into this leaf. And so if you don't do this thick enough, you're going to go right through the inside of that. And when I pull this away, you'll get to see that a little bit better. But we're going to do something to prevent this from cracking, because what will often happen when you've got something that's a deep vein, so I know that this leaf has a deep vein that goes up this way, and it has deep veins that go up this way. And so that vein comes really close to the edge of this clay as we're going to peel that away. And if it's real thin in those areas, as this dries, it's going to want to crack there, because the thinner areas are going to dry quicker than the thicker areas around it. And so we're going to add a little bit of clay on there. And so what I usually do is I start out with a coil of clay, and I can roll that coil, or I can just pinch this out. And I'm going to take and I'm going to attach that clay right to the back of this, and I'm going to squish it down and attach it really well to the back. And what this is going to do is it's going to add some thickness right along where that vein is. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to smooth this out. Now some people will work with water and a sponge to smooth this out. I prefer to just use my fingers. I don't want to get this really wet and squishy. No questions yet? Oh, everybody's quiet tonight. Anybody saying mystery box?
Yep.
Okay. You don't need to say mystery box. I'll explain about the mystery box at the end tonight, but I know we've trained everybody really well.
I'll be able to purchase it with an order.
Yep. It'll be available for everyone.
It's okay you're saying it, but you don't have to.
Yep. So now I've got that smoothed out, and I'm going to do a couple coils where I know the other veins are going. And you might be saying to yourself, well, how do you know exactly where those veins are? They go right out from the base of this and go up, and then they go out from that base and they go out this way, and they go out the same on the other side. Now there are narrower veins on this piece as well, but it's really these really thick veins that are the biggest concern. And you want to do all this before you remove the leaf form. And really the rhubarb is probably the only one that you absolutely should do this with if you're making a real large leaf form.
What are the approximate measurements of that leaf?
This leaf measures 13 inches by 13 inches, and I just went out in our yard because one of the next leaves that we're making, we just got more of the mold compound came in yesterday, and so probably over the weekend I will be making a new larger rhubarb, and we've got some really big leaves outside that we'll be using to make new ones. We've also got some pumpkin leaves. I was at a local restaurant today that has a garden, and he had some pumpkin leaves coming up, and I've used pumpkin leaves, real leaves, in the past, and they work well. And pumpkin leaves are great because they've got great shape, and I'll show you guys one that I've got here while we're working on this tonight. So once I've got that smoothed out,
There's other questions.
okay, other questions? Go ahead.
Are these able to be used for all types of clay?
Yep, any type of clay will work on this. I'm working with raku clay right now because I'm going to do a raku firing on these pieces.
And then if you set this outside, what type of clay do you use?
If I was going to be putting this outside, mid-range stoneware or high-fire stoneware would be best. But if you do earthenware, just make sure that the piece is sealed on both sides. And then if you get chips in it, that you seal those. Because if moisture gets into the pieces outside and you're in an area like I am in Wisconsin where it freezes in the fall and winter, you don't want those pieces freezing, because if that moisture penetrates into a low-fire clay body, it will kind of expand as it freezes and crystallizes, and it will cause the piece to flake and come apart.
And there's one person who's wondering if you possibly think you might do custom leaves. They would love to get a mold of a North Carolina tobacco leaf.
I've had, some people have told me they want some tobacco leaves. If it's something that you want exclusively for yourself, we can work that out. But if it's something that I want to introduce into the line, it's pretty easy to get me the leaves, and I need real leaves. They need to be fresh. And if you put them in a Ziploc bag with just a damp paper towel, not a sopping wet paper towel on each side, and you mail those to me, and we do like express mail or priority mail that it can get here within a couple days, I can actually make molds for those. So send me pictures, email me at info@claypuzzling.com. Email me pictures of any leaves that you've got that you think could be made. I know a lot of people have asked for ginkgo leaves. There's lots of different leaves out there that people have asked about. So we'll be making forms for them. And if it's something I want to introduce in the line, I'll make sure if you supply me with leaves that I'll cover the shipping and stuff, and then I'll get you a rubber leaf form, one of the first ones out of the mold.
And then someone wants to know if you'll have your bark available in rubber.
Yes, the bark, actually, I've got that right here, and I'll be showing how to do that tonight. We've got two sizes of the bark, and anybody who has ordered the ceramic one this past week or any that we've shipped out, we've actually upgraded them to the rubber version of that, so you don't have to worry about it breaking. And we had some that got broken shipping over the last couple of weeks. All right, while you're looking for other questions, what I'm doing now is I'm going along and I'm kind of tapering the edge of this, and I'm just taking my thumb and I'm kind of pinching away and beveling this edge a little bit. I don't want this to get super thin, but I want to get rid of that really thick, clunky look to the leaf. And by just pinching this and pulling off some of the clay just on the edge, it gives the illusion that the leaf is thinner than it really is. If you go too thin with the clay over the whole leaf form, the leaf won't peel away very well when you try to take that off of there. So just do this beveling on the edges to kind of thin it a little bit.
Lisa Leslie did answer this, but someone wanted to know how many uses you can get out of a leaf form before it needs to be replaced.
You can get hundreds of, I have yet to wear out a leaf. These are a very durable rubber product that they're made with, and they're very flexible. And I've learned that if I don't do the process right and I bend them, they will crack and break. And so there's a lot of steps to the process of making these, but you can see, I can take this leaf and crumple it into a ball and it springs right back. So they should last a very, very long time. All right, so I've beveled most of the edges, and now I'm just going to go along and I'm going to smooth. Again, some people might want to take water to do this. I prefer not to do that because I don't want this to get mucky and all wet, so I'm just dragging my finger along the edge to smooth this. I could use a dry sponge or just a little bit of dampness to a sponge, but try to avoid using a lot of water when you're working with these. So I want to just smooth out the rough areas on here. Make sure I've got my coils here. I just noticed there was a little area here where I could see a little bit of a gap, and make sure I've got that pressed out good. And I can always go back after this piece dries and I can smooth it with a sponge at that point. So this doesn't have to be perfect. All right, once I've got that pretty smooth, I can take then, if I want to put this and turn this into a bowl, bisque bowls are great as forms. And so I've got this large bowl here, and I can take and set this inside the bowl and peel the rubber form away. This one obviously has been used for different things. This one I used to do some stoneware stuff on, so I'm not worried. But if it was a different clay that I was going to be using, I would take and wash this off with a damp sponge to remove any clay that's on there. And I can take and set this on there. Now, if you have a bowl or a form that you find that you like, and it happens to be glazed, or it's wood, or it's glass, or some other type of material, just take a towel and put a towel or newspaper inside of that bowl to prevent the clay from sticking to it. And the nice thing with putting a towel inside of the bowl underneath, so if this was a glass bowl or something that was glazed, I could take this towel, I could set this over the top, put my leaf on top of here, and then remove this and do what I'm going to show you next. And then once it was firm enough, I could just take that towel and lift that piece out of there. But because this one is ceramic earthenware bisque, I'm just going to take and I'm going to set this on here, and then I'm going to peel the rubber leaf form away. And I don't want to just give this a yank. I want to kind of pull it slowly away. And the larger forms are a little more challenging than the small forms.
Would you ever leave the leaf on, or the clay on the rubber form to slow down the drying process?
No, I wouldn't, and the main reason I wouldn't is because once that clay starts drying, it shrinks. And as it shrinks, it's going to get tighter and tighter on that leaf form. So this is, see how deep these veins are on here? And this is why we added those extra coils on the back to add a little bit of thickness, because that thick vein goes way deep into that clay. And by adding that extra clay on the back of there, it will prevent that from cracking where those main veins go out. And now I can just take and kind of gently press this down into the bowl. I don't want to wreck the design on my piece.
Do you need cornstarch to prevent it from sticking?
Nope, the clay shouldn't stick on the form. I mean, you may get a little bit kind of on the edges and things on there, but you shouldn't have problems with that sticking to the form. It should release pretty easily. It doesn't hurt to put cornstarch on there, but it's really not necessary to put that on there because these don't absorb moisture, and so they release pretty easily from the clay. Now, when I use a form, I want to make sure that I don't have like this tip of the leaf. It comes pretty much right to the edge of the bowl, but if it hung out a little bit further than the edge of the bowl, I wouldn't want to take and bend that over the edge, because as this shrinks, this is going to pull in, and anything that hangs over the edge like that could get caught and crack and fall off as it dries. So like back here where these leaves come out a little bit, I don't want to bend them down. I want to keep them staying straight out. And so that is, and I'm going to let this sit in here now until the piece is dry enough that I can remove it. I don't need to worry about it sticking to the bisque because this is earthenware, and so it will absorb moisture. If you're in an area where there's fans and things blowing, it doesn't hurt to throw a piece of plastic over the top of this to kind of slow down that drying. But most of the time, I have fans going in here right now, but most of the time the fans aren't going unless if I'm working in here. So I'll just set this aside and let that piece dry before it gets fired. And once it's dry, then I'll go back and sometimes I'll smooth a little bit on the edges just with a wet brush or a wet sponge to kind of smooth out any imperfections. So I'll set that one aside. I've got some more clay slabs rolled out here. And if you don't have a slab roller, you can take the rubber leaf forms and you can lay them on there, and you can roll a rolling pin over the top of it, or you can just take and press it in with your fingers. And so I usually start on one corner and work my way across each petal or each leaf and press them into the clay. A rolling pin would work easier, but I forgot to bring one out into the workroom tonight. So, and I thought of it about 10 minutes before we started, and then I walked in the back room and grabbed some tools and stuff, and then I forgot to. No, I'm almost done with it. It's actually good because I can show you guys if you can't find your rolling pin or.
Your wife took your rolling pin back.
Yeah, she took it back. I just noticed I went off the edge here a little bit. I'm just gonna press a piece of clay into here. Normally I would pay better attention, but I'm looking up at the monitor to see that everything is in view, and I missed that I was hanging off the edge there a little bit. And what I'm looking for is that this leaf is kind of flush with my piece of clay. One of the nice things about these rubber leaf forms is that they're thicker than a real leaf, and so they will leave a deeper edge, and I'm going to show you with some small leaves pressed into clay how that really is advantageous. And I'm just going to rub over this and press with my hand. Hopefully the camera's not shaking too much that I'm getting anybody motion sick. All right, again, I'm going to take the wooden tool and I'm going to cut around these real narrow openings in here. I'm not too worried about getting all the clay out because I can pinch that out. Save that for.
Someone asked how many tools you take from my kitchen. Oh, he's been known to steal things.
I have been known to steal some things. The other day I had to. Yeah, the other day I went and bought some spatulas and some wooden spoons. Part of the mixing of this green rubber, it comes as a liquid. I need to have spatulas and wooden stir sticks and stuff, and Janine came down and she saw these spatulas and she's like, "Where did these come from?" And I said, "I went and bought them. Don't worry, I didn't steal them." A lot
like some that I had, but I realized the handles were longer, so I believed it.
Yeah. But yeah, there have been things that she's been looking for in the past, and cookie cutters and different stuff. All right, so I've done basically the same thing, cutting this one out. And now this one doesn't have the real deep veins, so I'm not worried about adding extra coils where the veins are, because the veins on this are not as deep as the rhubarb. But I wanted to show you guys kind of how quickly, for making leaf bowls, this is. And the nice thing too with the rubber forms is with the rubber forms you can get consistent shapes. Unique is great. But a lot of times when you use real leaves to do this technique, the leaves will rip and tear as you pull them off of the clay. And so a lot of times you only get one use out of some leaves. Rhubarb leaves, a couple times I've gotten them to work, a few times, but eventually, especially if you roll them through a slab roller, that slab roller tends to kind of rip them up.
Someone was commenting that they had purchased some previous leaves that maybe didn't have as good of detail from maybe being an older mold, and wondering if you're going to be using newer molds.
So all of the molds are made from real, oops, I just ripped off part of this leaf, are made from real leaves. Some of the molds we have redone. That was part of what I learned when I went out there. I know one of the leaves that I've had people comment about that don't have good detail is the holly leaves don't have real deep veining in them. And when I looked up and I went online and I looked for images of real holly leaves, they really don't have like the traditional veining. Like when we see a picture of a holly leaf and it has that vein up the middle and the veins going out on the sides, the real holly leaves don't really have a dimensional vein. When you hold them up to light, it appears that they have a vein there, but it's not dimensional, but it's you can see it. And so one of the things that I want to do is I want to redo those holly leaves so that they have more detail. And so those, we won't really be using a real leaf for those. Those will be sculpting a design and making a mold from a sculpture. Some of the other leaves, I'm going to show you all the leaves, most of the leaves tonight that are in the line. And some of them don't have a lot of veining, but the real leaves don't have a lot of veining. So the molds eventually, the molds that we cast from eventually wear out.
Okay. This person said it was one side of the leaf had good detail and the other side did not.
Oh, that's odd.
We'll send you pictures.
Yeah, send me pictures.
More about that, maybe.
Yeah, but we have redone several of the molds already just because the molds, some of them were literally crumbling and falling apart. And then some of them, we have so much demand for them that we've made additional molds so that we can produce them quicker.
Are you at the end going to talk about the expo?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So because someone had questions, but they can wait that until the end.
Yep.
And then one other question is that this is probably silly, but my daughter's watching and wants to know if it's food safe. She wants to make breads before I take them for clay, like baked bread with the leaf forms, maybe. I don't.
I'm not sure if you're saying, are the leaf forms themselves food safe? So are you putting them on dough and then wanting to bake them? I would not bake the leaves. Part of the process of manufacturing the leaves, they are baked, but you can't really go above like 325 degrees or the leaves will start to melt. So I probably
Maybe
wouldn't.
She can use your clay form.
Yeah, you could make a bisque one. So I could take this and make a bisque leaf and use that in the bread. There's a lot of uses for these leaf forms, and that was one of the things that I looked at with this company. Is that these rubber leaf forms can be used with like cake decorating. I can see using them with like fondant. We're going to have a new driveway poured next month and a new walkway. And I want to take some of these rubber leaf forms and press them into the walkway and do some impressions, and they will peel back. People work with concrete, and so you can use these with concrete. Seems like there are other things we were talking about. Now the stem on this kind of got broken off. This has a little stem, but you can see the clay just kind of stuck to it as I pulled that away. And so what I'm doing is I'm adding a little stem on here, and then I'm going to take this wooden tool and I'm going to attach that and recreate the veining on the leaf.
Someone suggested that maybe with the bread or whatever that she wanted to just press them into cookie dough or some dough. Would that be okay? They're safe.
Yes. Cookie, yes, I was like, there were other things that we had talked about that these would be good for, and using them with cookie dough and pie crusts and things, you can take and make, you can make impressions. They are safe for that. I could eat this rubber leaf and I probably wouldn't get sick. I think it would be really gross to do, but. All right. So now this is the large fig leaf. And this one I'm going to set aside, and I'm going to raku fire these, and I'll show these later on. All right. Now, another way that you can do this is taking a slab, and I got bowls everywhere here. I can take a smaller slab, and I can make a bowl, and the bowl, I can use smaller leaves in them to make impressions. And there are tons and tons and tons of different leaves, but I'm actually going to use now some of the new fig leaves, some of the smaller fig leaves for this piece. And sometimes I'll leave the edges of the slab real rough like this and not smooth that out because I want it to be really kind of organic. And so I'll usually take and kind of place the leaves on here. See which way I want to do this. So I'm going to do these 3 leaves, I guess, on here. And I can take, and again, I could use a rolling pin. I could roll this through the slab roller, or I can press this down in. And I want this to be flush with the clay. And I'm going to show you, once I take this out, we're going to place this slab inside of this bisque bowl, and we're going to make just a solid bowl instead of making an individual leaf. But the nice thing with these versus using real leaves, because real leaves are usually real thin, because of the thickness of these rubber forms, once I remove these, it leaves a really nice deep impression. So when I go to do a wash of color on here, it really can catch in the crevices along the edges, where a real leaf, a lot of times you don't get a good crisp edge there, and as you do your wash, it just kind of fades out into the clay. So I'm going to take and just lift these leaves out, and I'll lift this up and show you what I mean with the edges. Whoops. So you can see along this edge of the leaf the nice deep impression it makes. So when I do a wash of color on here, and a lot of times I'll go with like a wash of like a black glaze, a product like Stroke and Coat, Easy Strokes, Paula McCoy's Color Concepts. I'll do a wash of black or a dark brown, wipe it back so it's like an antiquing, and that will pick up all of the details. I did a video a while back on the method of adding the fall colors to the leaves. You can do different shades of greens and yellows to the leaves as well. So that is an option for doing something like this. Now, as I press this down into the bowl, I usually kind of lift up a little bit on the edge so that the air that's kind of trapped under there can easily get out, because I don't want to force this down and create fingerprints necessarily in the clay or wreck my details. And I can leave the edges sticking up like this. I can take and press them down so that it's more of an even bowl. Again, I don't want to take this and bend it down, because as this piece dries, this clay is going to shrink and it's going to catch here, and a lot of times it'll cause the piece to crack if you leave it on there too long. I actually kind of thought that was cool with this just kind of sticking up randomly like that. And now this piece will just sit in this bisque bowl. It'll dry. These rough edges on here, when I do that wash of color, will catch on there. I don't want little sharp points, and so sometimes I will take and smooth those, or before I fire it, I will go and just take a damp sponge around there to take away any sharp edges that are on there. And that's all there is to doing a solid bowl like that with the leaf forms. I may raku fire that one too. I'll have to see. All right. Now, what about making dimensional leaves? So if I want to make small leaves to add on to a piece, like, for example, these pumpkins. So this happens to be the mum leaves that I did for around the top of the pumpkin. Pumpkin itself is made using the bark texture pad, which I'll be showing. These clay owls that I've got behind me here, their wings were also made. This happens to be the mum leaves on this one too. Can you tell I like the mum leaves? And so the leaves, don't just think of them as leaves. They can be used for a lot of different things. This tree, and this poor tree has traveled all around the country, so it has lots of chips in it, but this is using all different leaves, from the mum leaves to the lemon leaves to the dahlia to the oak. So there's a whole variety of different leaves in this tree, and this is that technique where I do the black wash and then do the fall colors on those leaves. I did the same thing on the owls here as well. So if I want to make some dimensional leaves, let me grab something other than the new leaves here. So I've got one of the pumpkin leaves. And so what I'll usually do with this is I will take a slab of clay, and so I saved all these pieces that I cut off on the side here, and I'll take a piece and I just go around and I press the leaf in with my thumb and my fingers so that it's pressed in and it's pretty well flush in that piece of clay. And then instead of taking a knife around there and cutting it out, on small leaves it's really easy to just kind of pull up from the bottom and pull away and tear away that excess clay. Now, it's not going to give you a real smooth edge, but we're also going to do the same thing with beveling that edge. On the small leaves, I don't usually bevel the very, very bottom of the leaf. And the reason I don't do that is because if I get it too thin along the bottom, it's hard to grab a hold of it and peel it away from the form.
Are the color products on the leaves stroking coat?
Yeah, so I use stroking coat on those leaves. Concepts will work. Fun Strokes, Paula's Colors for Earth, her color concentrates will work. Once I've got those edges beveled and I kind of tap down to smooth it, then I grab onto the stem of the leaf and I grab onto that clay and I peel it back and I've got my pumpkin leaf. And so on things like, well, the pumpkin that I used the mum leaves on, that's how I make these dimensional leaves. And so if it's going to go onto a piece, I can take so that it's not so flat. For example, if it's coming out from the top of the pumpkin, I can take and kind of bend this part back and make this a little bit wavy. So as it comes out from the top of the pumpkin, it's got a little bit of bend and twist to it, and I can set those aside. A lot of times I'll do those leaves, I'll fire them separately and glue them on after, or you can score and slip them onto the mold as well, or slip and score them onto the piece that you're building as well. All right, so we're going to do one other thing here, and that is doing it inside of a clay puzzling mold. And so this is the 9-inch sphere that I have here, and we're going to incorporate the bark texture pad, and I think I'm going to do kind of some. Actually, I'm going to show you two different things here with this. I'm going to show you two different methods. So there's the method, the first one that I'm going to show you is just doing solid puzzling with the leaf forms. And I can take those leaf forms and I can place them inside the mold. Anytime I place them inside the mold, I want the textured side facing up. One of the most common mistakes that people make with this is they think about how it's going to look when they take it out of the mold, and they have a tendency to put the leaf in so that the texture is showing on the outside, because in your mind that totally makes sense. But if I put that in there and press the clay over it, I'm not going to have any veining in there. So you want the vein side sticking up. Because this is a round sphere shape, I'm going to place a big leaf in the bottom, and then I'm going to press pieces of clay over the top of this. The more areas that you overlap these pieces of clay, the more lines you'll have showing. And that's where the term puzzling came from, because everywhere that those coils overlapped, it looked like a jigsaw puzzle. Now, as I work my way up the side of the mold, I'm going to take and put some more leaves in here. Again, vein side facing up, and I can take and press that clay. And I want to try to keep, pretty uniform thickness here with the clay that I'm pressing inside the mold. And the harder I press, the more details I'll pick up, and the less puzzling lines I will have where those pieces meet.
If you want a flat leaf, would you have to put something over it when it's drying to prevent it from curling up and melting?
Yeah, if you wanted to do just flat leaves, I would take and place those on some type of a board. Drywall works well, or different types of project boards work well, so that the leaves can, as I'm talking, I almost put that in upside down. Did you see that? Anybody else catch that? I was checking to see if you guys are watching. So that when they dry, the surface underneath them will absorb moisture. So things like drywall work really well. And then um, put another piece of drywall on top of them and let them sit between there. You can take and kind of remove that drywall sometimes during the day if you're, say, you're working around the area where those are setting so that the air can kind of get at them. But then watch so that they don't start to dry too fast and warp and curl up on the edges. And then, you know, after they sit out for an hour or so, you can take and put the other board back on top of it and then leave it sit overnight. And it'll usually take a few days of it sitting between the boards that the leaves will be dry enough that there's little risk of them warping. This is the clay puzzling is a great way too to use up all those little scraps of clay. So I kind of wadded up all those little pieces and I'll take and really squish those and flatten them. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to wedge these pieces to get any air pockets out. And then I'm going to go across and I'm going to rub and smooth out where all of those pieces of clay met up and make sure that it's all squished together really well. And I'm going to go right up to the edge of the mold. I don't need to go past the edge of the mold, but I want to make sure now that all of these seams are all squished together really well. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other half of the mold. I'm going to start out with this big leaf in here. And we'll get, slide this up on the side a little bit. We'll get this other leaf on this side. Now I want to do this on both sides, that it's all filled in with clay, right up to the seam line. If it goes past the seam line, we'll end up removing some of that clay before, bless you, we'll remove that clay that goes over the edge. And then the opening in the bottom where the hole is, we don't want to fill that in, but we can cut the clay away if we do cover part of that up. Wherever the rubber leaves are, you want to really make sure that that clay is pressed well in those areas. Because that will pick up the detail of the leaf.
Are you going to wrap through this leaf though?
I don't know, because if I was going to put this outside, if I really wanted to use it as like a garden sphere outside, raku pieces don't hold up real well in direct sunlight for long periods. They tend to fade, and we've talked about different types of sealers and things, and there are some epoxy, two-part epoxies I've heard out there that work, but I haven't had a chance to really experiment and see how long they hold up to the sunlight and protect those pieces. So this one I probably would do in maybe like a copper wash or an iron oxide wash or some type of a glaze that would pick up a lot of the texture and break on its edges. The next one I'm going to show you, the last thing that I'm going to show you is doing the bark technique in here. And that bark texture is great with stoneware glazes or things like element glazes, make those element glazes that will kind of break on the edges and get kind of that multi-tone coloring. because that bark has so much cool texture to it. Now, before I put these two halves together,
If you were doing a bowl and you wanted the design on the inside and on the outside, would you like press the leaf in, or can you then use a rubber leaf on top of what you just did?
Yeah, if you were doing a bowl and you wanted the leaf design on both sides, what I would probably do is do the leaf on one side, roll it, cut around it with a wooden tool, and then you'd have to buy a second leaf form, which would be horrible, and then place that, on there, because if you took that leaf out of the one side and then laid it over the top and pressed it, you'd lose probably a lot of your texture on the underside.
And if you did that, would you remove it right away or let it sit?
I would still remove it right away. Once I had both sides pressed, I would pull that clay out. Now when you go to press it down into a bowl, just be careful that you don't press too hard, because you could end up, wrecking the texture on the outside of the piece if you press too hard. But you would have to remove it, because if you left that in there on the bottom of the bowl, again, as that dried, it would end up probably cracking. Now, you saw me take the wooden tool, and I just took that and scraped away any clay that was up over the edge on here. And now I'm adding a coil on this mold down below that seam line, and I'm just pinching this coil out. It doesn't have to be a perfect coil, but I usually tell people they're about the size of the thickness or diameter of my pinky, and I want to add that coil going around. I'm going to remove the excess clay from the other half of the mold. And then as I put these two halves together, I usually line up the hole on the bottom, and then I take and wrap my hands around this. So as I flip this over, if that clay wants to flop out, my fingers are there to catch it. And as I set the molds together, then I slide my fingers out, and that clay can drop down on the other side. Each clay puzzling mold comes with a Velcro strap. And so that strap then goes around the outside of the mold. And then I usually hold this end of the strap, and I'll pull this really tight over my finger and then slide my finger out as I pull that over the top. Now, it'll be hard to see in the camera, but the coil I can see is on this half of the mold. You can kind of see, oops, I'm looking at the monitor. You can see that coil is over here, so it's on that half of the mold. Now, if I could reach my hand inside, I would reach in and pinch that coil to attach it to this other half. So the coil is here. I want to pinch it over to attach it to the other side. Because I can't get my hand all the way down inside this mold, I've got the press tool with the little light, and I can then take that in there, and I can run that along and press that coil to attach the two halves. You can actually see in there for a change. Usually it's hard to get it in the camera that you can actually see what I'm doing inside of the mold. So I'm working my way along with the ball, the foam ball end, and I'm squishing that clay. And what I look for, because then I'll take the tool and I'll kind of drag it up and down over that coil. I want to make sure that with this technique, that it gets pressed really nice. And I don't want to see either edge of that coil when I look on the inside. So when I do workshops, and I tell people before you pull the mold apart, let me look inside, and I look in there, and if I can see edges of that coil, I'll usually tell them to go back in there and press it a little bit more and get rid of any lines.
Amazed with your ingenious tool.
Yes. All right, so once I've done that, I can immediately remove that Velcro strap. I can take and just wiggle that half a little bit and pull that off, and you can see the rubber leaves are inside and they're sticking to the surface. I would normally, if I had the time, but we're live, the bottom of this is very squishy. This is wet clay, And so I don't want to take this out of this half of the mold. So what I'll usually do is I'll take, and in the summer, I'll set this outside in the sun for a little bit, or if it's not a sunny day, I may take a fan and just blow a fan on the bottom. Some people will use heat guns. Be very careful if you use a heat gun because you can melt these leaves. You can ask Janine sometime about melting the Formica countertop as well, but that's a whole different story. But be careful with the heat gun. But you just want it to be firm enough on the bottom so that you can pop it out of the mold. So then what I would do to pop it out of the mold is I would take and put it in my other hand, and then I would take and lift the other half of the mold away. So I'm going to take it out all the way just for tonight to show you guys, but then I'm going to set this back in half the mold. Where that seam line was, you need to kind of go back and smooth that out. Again, I try not to use water at this point. I just like to use my fingers to smooth that, or I'll use like a flexible metal rib. I can always go back after this is dry, and I can go back and smooth that a little bit more. If there's a really big gap in there that I don't like, I can take little pieces of clay and fill it in, but you can see all of the lines where all of those pieces of clay met up. That is your puzzling. And then I'm just going to take and I'm going to peel these leaves away. If I can't get them with my finger, I'll take a needle tool and just kind of gently peel them away, and you have that great impression of the leaf in here. Somewhere my needle tool is.
Someone said, won't the heat gun melt the leaves?
Yes.
Yeah, so be careful if you use a heat gun.
I haven't done that, but as I started,
Far away.
yeah, as I started to say, you know, a heat gun, I was like, ooh, I could see people melting the leaves. Because you want to do all that smoothing and stuff before you remove the leaves, because otherwise you run the risk of damaging your design just handling it while you smooth out any imperfections. Now, if you tried to make a piece like this or throw a piece and you tried to take those leaves and press it into it, you probably would be squishing the piece in. But look at those great leaf designs all over that piece. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to set it back inside half of the mold. And this technically could sit in here and dry until it's completely dry. Then, of course, go over it with a damp sponge, smooth out any little imperfections and things that are on there. The last thing I want to show you is the bark texture pad. So the bark texture pad, and I'm just going to use this mold again and we'll pop part of this out. The bark texture pad, so it comes in two different sizes. There is the large pad and there's the mini pad. The large pad is good if I wanted to take a slab of clay and I wanted to run this through the slab roller with that slab to get that texture over the whole piece of clay. I could do that. I could also take that slab of clay and place it on top of it and roll a rolling pin over it, or use my fingers, and I'm just going to do a small area here and press it down into the bark texture to pick up all those deep crevices. This bark texture pad takes a lot of this rubber material to make this, because it is, some of the texture in here is very, very deep, and so this pad is thick and uses a lot of that rubber, but it's very flexible. I was actually thinking, like, if I had a piece that was cylindrical, could I wrap it around it and do some texture? But I would probably do it before I would hand build the piece. But if I wanted to make a cylinder shape or hand build something with this, I could do that texture, and look at that great bark texture that you get in that clay. The mini is good for when you're going to take pieces of clay and create bark inside of like a clay puzzling mold. So this was a technique that I did for Clay Share Day. There's a video out there if you want to see this, using Jessica's rolling pin for the birch trees and cardinals. This one is taking small pieces of clay, making the bark texture, and sticking them inside the mold. So that's where, if I'm not doing a big slab, this mini one is perfect, because I can take chunks of clay and I can just tear off random pieces and press them onto the little texture pad to get my textured pieces that I'm going to put inside the mold.
Real quick, are the fig leaves on your website?
Yes, the fig leaves, we actually, today, everything went live on the website. The fig leaves are all on there. They're sold, like the large one is sold individually, the medium one is sold individually, and then there's a set of 4 small ones that are sold as a set, and then there's one set that has all of them in the set.
And then how thick would the clay need to be for the large bark mat?
So,
which, thanks for not calling it a maxi pad. You got the mini pad
and the maxi pad. So the maxi pad, no, the large texture pad, I would probably start out with a slab of clay that was close to a 1/2 inch thick. And kind of play around with that, rolling it through your slab roller so that you don't end up getting too thin. Now what I can do is I can take and make some, I'm going to make a small leaf here, and I'm just going to show you guys on a little section inside the clay puzzling mold how to do this technique. So I'm going to take a piece of clay that's about the size of this leaf, and I'm going to press the leaf into the clay, and I'm going to tear it away kind of like I did on the pumpkin leaf. And this is one of the new fig leaves.
We started at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We did start at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. It's almost 8.
It's almost 8 o'clock here. We're in Central Time, so it should be about...
It's almost 7 for you. Someone's asking how they missed the start. But you can rewatch the live, so no worries.
Yep, the link that brings you to this live will also take you to the recording. So you can click on that same link. And I've been saving all of the lives on my learnfiredarts.com Facebook page so that it's easy to find. Just going to peel this away, and I've got my small fig leaf. Now, as I put this in the mold, I want this texture to show on the outside of the piece. So when we lay the rubber forms in there, we want the texture side facing up. But when we want the leaf form showing on the outside, we're going to do it with the texture side facing out. And then I can take pieces of bark and I can attach them going around this leaf. And I don't have to fill in all of this. I can leave some openings in here. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to make another leaf, and I'm just going to do a little section in here and then pull it out so you guys can see, because the rest of it of attaching, I'll talk about at the edges why it's a little different with this when you don't do solid puzzling. Make another leaf here. And, you know, sometimes I get people in workshops that are like, well, I prefer to cut around the edges of it. Look how much faster this goes when you just tear that clay away, and then I can bevel and pinch the edges of this.
Oh, so Dory, you're on Mountain Time, but it's now 6 p.m. I wonder, do you guys maybe not do daylight savings? Because we do daylight savings time and go forward in spring, so yeah. Anyway, as far as missing the mystery box, there was nothing like that anymore. You can order it from the website. Mike will explain at the end. You're actually kind of you're 2 hours behind us then.
So I'm going to just take and add a few pieces of bark in here. I'll have to keep that in mind when I do postings in the future.
It's like Mountain Standard Time, Mountain. We're Central Daylight Time.
Yeah.
So some places I know don't do daylight savings.
I wish they've talked about doing away with the daylight savings, and I wish they would, because that is just so confusing.
Or have it either everywhere or not everywhere.
Yeah. Now, where these pieces of bark and the leaves overlap, I don't want to press real hard. Where on the other ones, I wanted to press that clay really hard. If I press really hard, I'm going to lose my texture of my bark, and I'm going to lose my texture of my leaf. So anywhere that they overlap or meet up, I want to just take and kind of drag with my finger that clay over. And I'm not going to do a whole bunch. I would generally do like another leaf over here, but I'm just going to do some pieces of bark so that I can kind of get up to the edge and show you guys what I would do. To put this together on the other half. So you would do the same thing on both halves of the mold, and I would continue working my way around, and I can leave openings. When I'm doing the bottom area, I want to do that fairly solid, because when I take this out of the mold where the opening is, this is where this piece is going to stand, and so I want to make sure that I've got it fairly solid on that bottom area so that it's got good support.
Yeah, there's somebody else on Mountain Time, and it's 7 for them, and she said, yeah, they don't do daylight savings, so it's confusing to know what time.
Yeah, on Facebook, a lot of times, like when I create the listing, Facebook will automatically adjust it for like where you are usually, but obviously that feature didn't work.
Well, they got it figured out, so.
So yeah, I usually put in there like 7 o'clock Central Time. So if you can figure out or go online and say, okay, what time is it here when it's 7 o'clock Central Time?
There's like, I think places in Indiana that are Central Time and don't do daylight savings.
Yeah, Indiana at one time I know was kind of split, yeah. All right, so I've got this half of the mold and I've left some openings in between these pieces. Now I would do the same thing on the other half of the mold. And then to attach it, rather than doing a coil going all the way around, I'll actually do some more pieces of bark randomly, and I'll attach those and have them sticking up. So I'm going to do a few pieces of it here, and I would do this all the way around. And I'm just going to do a few of them on this side here to show you, to give you an idea. And then I squish those to attach them. So I've got a few pieces, and I would continue having pieces randomly sticking up. And then before I put the halves together, I would go and bend these inward so that when I put the other half of the mold on, they don't get caught between the halves. When I reach in with that press tool, that tool is going to come in through the opening, and it's going to go like this, and it's going to squish these up onto the other half of the mold. And then I'll just kind of take this, and I won't press down, I'll just kind of drag this so that it kind of squishes them together. And then what you should get, and this is going to be really soft as I remove this, but what you'll get then is a sphere that has your leaves, and as long as you don't press too hard, you'll have that detail in there. And then other areas, you'll have the bark texture. So this sphere, then you could put a light underneath it. You could do something inside, cellophane, things like that on the inside. This bowl here was a workshop that I did, and this was using the wide opening sphere molds. They also have a flat bottom on them. But we did the bark texture on the bottom half of the mold, and then we did leaves up at the top, and then another layer of bark along the top. This piece hasn't been fired. I just demoed on this one of how the coloring was done. And there is a video out there on how to do the coloring of the leaves. There's a video out there on this entire technique. I'll try to post links of this on my page tonight or tomorrow so that you guys can see how that is all done. The pumpkins, these were done using the bark texture inside the molds, and we just did it solid instead of leaving openings. And so that's how that texture was done. Those guys, yeah, I think that's about it. I have made a huge mess here. So I want to show you guys just a few of the other leaves, and then I'll talk about the mystery box, and I'll talk about the expo. So,
are you bringing leaves and bark to Waffletown?
Of course I will. So I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly. These are some water lily pads. There are sprig molds out there for little frogs, and I think these will be great for doing little frogs on there, or if you want to hand build some little frogs, those would be wonderful. This is the wild gourd. This is a nice one. It's got really nice details and textures in there. That one is the wild gourd. And these are all up on our website, the learnfirearts.com website. This is the large oak leaf. There's also a set of 3 small oak leaves. This is the large grape leaf, and there are 3 smaller grape leaves. We're planning to add some more larger grape leaves as well. This is a small rhubarb. We're going to be adding a giant rhubarb leaf soon. You saw the large rhubarb leaf. This one is the water lily. This one is great for bowls as well, has really nice texture. This one is the wild Cincerca. This one has, if you can see through the plastic, great detail in there as well. That one is great for bowls. The sycamore is very similar to the wild Cincerca, but it doesn't have as much texture in the background, and it's just a little bit shorter. Very similar. We've got the catalpa leaf. This is great for bowls. Great texture, great size. Hollyhock leaf, also great for bowls. Now the canna leaf, this one, again, is made from a real leaf. This one really only has a vein down the middle. And like this one comes in, there are 2 large leaf assortments with 5 leaves in each one. This is the arrowhead. This is a cool leaf and has lots of texture coming out on it. Large cabbage. There's also a small cabbage. Then there's lots of little leaf designs and other medium ones. This is one of my favorites, hydrangea. These are great leaves. I use these on one of the owls behind me as the wings. We're planning on coming out with some more sizes of these because these have great detail, and we've got some hydrangea bushes out in our yard. There are poinsettia leaves. This is the small poinsettia leaves. We actually sell these in a set with medium and large. This is the morning glory. These are great. I can see this on a tree of leaves. I think that one will be great on the trees and other things as well. This one is the violets. Can't see these real well, but there's 4 different sizes of violets in that package. Some of these I opened up to photograph today. There are cherry leaves. Now, a lot of these leaves, and a lot of these I'm going to show you now, I call them just kind of traditional leaves. There's cherry, there's berry, there's apple. A lot of them look really similar. And I'm finding the other one. So here is the apple leaves, a little bit longer, but kind of a traditional leaf shape. And then the lemon, which we've had and sold for years, the lemon leaves, there's 4 different sizes. We called this the traditional leaf, but because we have some distributors who sold these leaves, and we're going to continue to sell these leaves. Clay King is a distributor for these leaves, and the Clay Art Center out in near Seattle area, Tacoma area, they sell them. And so these are actually lemon leaves. And the reason we called them traditional leaves is because they're just a traditional leaf shape. But if we called them lemon leaves, I was afraid people would be like, well, I'm not making lemons. And really, they're a good traditional leaf. So the cherry, there's rose leaves. A lot of those leaves are really good, just traditional shapes. These are the small grape leaves. There's 3 of those in a set. Then we go into...
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because there's a lot of questions.
Okay.
So someone was asking about sending you actual leaves, and I said yes, but maybe you need to
email me
about it because you can't do them all at one time and keep them fresh for. Yeah,
email me pictures of the leaves that you're looking at, and we'll try to set something up if it's something that I want to introduce into the line.
And then, so the large rhubarb leaf on the website isn't the largest one you'll have then?
We'll have one more larger leaf, yep. Japanese morning glory, these we've had for a little while. We just introduced those not too long ago. These are interesting. These are iris leaves, and this is the small iris. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these. I've got a few ideas with those, and so some of these shapes are new to a lot of my customers. These leaves have been around for a long time. I just didn't carry all of them. The holly leaves, these are the ones that I was saying don't have really deep detail in them. They kind of have a center vein, but there aren't veins going out, and most people are looking for more of a vein in there. So we're going to resculpt those. Mum leaves, that's what I had on the pumpkin, super duper popular. These are the dahlia leaves. We've sold these for a long time. There's 4 of those in a set. Things like these are daisy leaves, and I was looking at these and I'm like, okay, these are cool, and I can see making actual daisy flowers and having these leaves around them. I see a lot of potential with those. I have a lot of ideas in my head of things that I'm going to do. I just need the time to do it. The ivy leaves we used to sell years ago, and the littlest one I lost out of this bag, but there's 3 sizes. There's one smaller of the ivy, and those are really cool, making ivy and vines on pieces. There are,
with a package of rhubarb leaves, assorted sizes, or no?
no, the rhubarb leaves right now just come in the large and the small, and then we're going to have a jumbo coming out. We might do some other sizes in between. There's rose leaves, small and large. Keep these in mind for the mystery box, because those are part of the mystery box. Little geranium leaves. Look at those little geranium leaves. I'm not sure about making geranium flowers, how I'll do that. There are pansy leaves. They're small and large pansy leaves.
Would you recommend a starter set?
So there is, for the small leaves, there is a small leaf assortment. They don't have a lot of these newer leaves in that assortment. We're probably going to make some more assortments. These are sweet pea leaves. Lily of the Valley. These are kind of long, narrow leaves. Those I think will be very interesting. And then there are these little bitty tiny leaves. These are called small assortment. These are so little. I can't imagine making dimensional leaves with these, but I can see these pressed into something to make designs. If I was making maybe a little tea set or something, those might be kind of cool. I'm not sure where I'll use those, but somebody may have a use for them. The pumpkin leaves are back. The mold, we did redo the mold for this, and we actually have some new pumpkin leaves that will be coming out. These are the 4 original leaves. We've got a larger one coming out and some other shapes in these in the small ones. Then we're going to be coming out with a really big one. So this is a pumpkin leaf, and I was just over at a restaurant today I mentioned that had a garden, and so this is a pumpkin leaf, and these are great. There was a raku piece that I had shown that was actually made from this. This is a bisque piece that I had made from a leaf and was going to make bisque forms from this, but now we bought the company and I'll be able to do this actually in rubber. So we'll have several sizes of big pumpkin leaves as well. And what I like about these is they've got kind of the openings and things in there, where the rhubarb leaf is more of a solid leaf going around.
There's people coming up with all sorts of good ideas to do with those little leaves.
This is the big rhubarb leaf that'll be coming out. This is the big one. I had done this in the Magic Metallics. So that will be coming out soon. And we'll probably have some other different types of textures and things that we'll be coming out with in time. We're going to kind of take it easy, or not take it easy, but not overdo it, because there's going to be a lot of demand for the new leaves. You know what I don't have here is the new maple leaves. So the original maple leaves, this is a leaf that isn't cut out. So when these are cast, we have to go around with the scissors and cut all of that extra rubber away from the edges. So I kind of joked in one of my posts that I'm never going to use the oak or the maple leaves again on anything. But this maple leaf has really deep indentations that come in. This one can be a challenge when you're trying to pinch the clay away to make a dimensional leaf. They're awesome for making impressions, but making 3-dimensional leaves can be a challenge. So the new maple leaves that I showed in the posting, it's a different maple tree. It doesn't have that deep indentation, but it has that kind of basic shape. And so there are brand new maple leaves out there that are up on the website now as well. All right.
Which leaf would you recommend for the bird bath?
For the bird bath, I would probably wait for the new, really large rhubarb leaf when that comes out. I would probably wait for that. Otherwise, I did, one of the bird baths that I did had it was a large bowl that I used, and I took a lot of the large leaves and did the impressions into the big bowl, kind of like I did here on this piece. But I did a really large bisque bowl, did a slab of clay, and then I took all these different leaves and I pressed them in around the edges. And I'll post a picture of that as well so that you guys can see that.
Someone wants to know if you'll let them know when the pumpkin leaves are available, if you'll post that you have that new stuff on your website.
Yep, the new stuff we'll post, and we'll send out emails when all of that stuff becomes available.
And as far as leaves, somebody has kudzu leaves, whatever those are, and kiwi leaves. Sounds like people have all sorts of fun ideas to send to us. So.
Yep, send me pictures, email me. All right, mystery box. Normally the mystery box, we have one and we draw a name, and we've kind of gotten away from that because there were some challenges with that. So the way we're doing the mystery box now is on the website learnfiredarts.com. There is an item under the very first category that will come up when you click on the shop section, and it's mystery box, and it's $5. So if you place a $50 order on our website, while these are available, you're going to get an assortment of leaves for $5. You're going to get large rose leaves, and these are nice traditional looking leaves. You're going to get the small rose leaves. There's 4 of those. You're going to get the large pansy leaves. You're going to get the small pansy leaves. You may get some other random leaves in there. And then Jeanette and Melody found that and they knew that this company manufactured at one time other shapes. And so there was a whole box that I got of very unique shapes. Everything from, and these are hard to see through the cellophane, but there's like a wiener dog in here and an elephant, and I'm not sure what else is in that package. But this one has Christmas ornaments and a peacock. And so you're going to get a few packs of, well, that's another wiener dog one. You're going to get a few packs of some of these very unique shapes. This one has bunnies and lambs in it. Yep, this one has the bunnies, this one has lambs. So you'll get a few random packs of these. These are so old. These were $1.50 back probably in the 70s. This was, the company then was in Wichita, Kansas. I don't even know who the owners were at that time, but the cellophane on these are yellowed, but the forms inside still feel flexible. We actually got the molds for these as well. We're not planning to produce these, so as long as we have these, we'll be sticking these in. If you use them, you use them. If you don't, you're going to get some other great leaves. The rose leaves and the pansy leaves are great. We got very little inventory of product when we bought the company because they couldn't keep up with the demand, that they didn't have a lot of extra. But somebody made like a gazillion of these leaves, and so we have a lot of inventory of these. So we're putting all of this together in a goodie box for $5. You're getting 10, 20, 30, 40, close to $50 worth of stuff for $5. So you need to place a $50 order, and you can select that mystery box that is $5 and add that to your order. As long as your order is $50, you can only order one mystery box. We had a few people that on the last one we did, they ordered multiple mystery boxes, and so we do have a disclaimer in there now that you can only one per person per shipping address, and we'll be watching for that.
Did you see any fish?
There may have been fish in some of them. I didn't bring all of them. There was a turkey mold. There was really some really strange things in there. So the last thing I want to talk about is Fire and Arts Expo. This is coming up in August here in Wisconsin. The dates for workshops are August 11th to 13th, and then the trade show is the 12th and the 13th. This is in Waukesha, Wisconsin at the Expo Center, and we've got half of the workshops up there. I'm still waiting for some information from two of the teachers. And so if you go to firedartsexpo.com, it'll actually take you into our Learn Fired Arts website, but it will take you right to the expo page. And there's information on there about exhibitors, and we've still got some exhibitors we need to add on to that page, and the workshops and things that will be available. If you pre-register for workshops, right now we've got Paula McCoy. I've got all of her stuff up there, and all of my stuff is up there. Bob Marini is going to be coming from Mako. He's going to be doing workshops throughout as well. And then we've got Carol from St. Louis is going to be doing fashion hues as well. And her fashion hues, she's going to have a variety of pieces, and you'll get to just pick out a piece and do that piece in fashion hues in her booth. And there will probably be some other make and takes and things going on with the trade show as well. So all the information is up there. You can start registering for workshops if you would like. Admission to the event is $5. If you sign up for a bunch of workshops, your admission is going to be free. There's going to be food on site this year. They haven't had food vendors there in the past. We will have food there for lunches there as well. So any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is GR Pottery going to be there? Someone wanted to do a pre-order with them.
Tomorrow I'm going to be giving Jeff a call. He's been on my list to call for a while. He had initially said he wanted to be there, but I haven't confirmed that with him yet. So I hope to add him to the list maybe tomorrow.
And then are there any special hotel arrangements or information?
I have put out requests with multiple hotels for a group rate, and today I finally got some information back, and I looked at the pricing. There's a Best Western that's the closest in Waukesha, and so I had put in a request there and at a couple other hotels, and today I got information back from Best Western, and it was for hotels by the airport in Milwaukee, which is 10-15 minutes away. I want a rate at the one that is 4 minutes from the convention. So you can go on to hotels.com and type in Waukesha Expo Center, and that Best Western, it was $119 a night, I think was the rate that I saw for those dates. I was hoping to get a better rate. If we do get a better rate, you can always ask for that rate if you do make a reservation now. But just do a search based on the Waukesha Expo Center, and it should show you some hotels that are really close and nearby.
Okay, and then, someone was just wondering if you could put the exact, or say the exact info on the molds you use in demos, because they have a hard time finding them, when you're using the sphere mold or whatever, I suppose.
So the sphere mold, that comes in 8 different sizes right now, 7 or 8 different sizes. That was the 9-inch. So on the website, it'll have the dimensions, and so there's a 2-inch. There's one that's 3-inch, 3.5-inch.
I was just
4
using
1/4.
that as an
Yeah.
example, but she said she needs to get a base for a bird bath. So.
Oh, so there's 2 different bases for the bird bath. There's a round one, and there is a hexagon-shaped one. And if you can't find it, just shoot me an email or a message, and I'll get you a link to that.
Okay.
All right, that's it for tonight. Feel free to put in your orders. We've got a lot of leaves in stock right now, and they should ship out pretty quickly. And if we don't have them in stock, we can just make them. So thanks you guys for joining us tonight. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure what we'll be doing in a couple of weeks, but I'll come up with something else. So take care, have a good week, and we will see you later.